Welcome to the first edition of the G2 Taxidermy podcast, brought to you by FSI.
Yeah, hey,
Sam Gaylord, what's up?
I'm high right now.
Yeah.
I'm high. I've got my hero on Zoom right now, so I mean, I am just stoked.
Well,
stoked.
This is cool. So, real quick, this is a new monthly series that we're firing off on the Working Class Bowhunter podcast platform. Something fun with G2 and Old Barn Taxidermy and the great thing you guys are doing. And what's the goal with this? Because this is really for taxidermists.
Yeah, we're just hoping that we can bring just some entertainment to the taxidermy industry. I think there might be a podcast or two out there right now, but nothing really big, I don't believe.
Yeah.
We just want to bring awareness, hopefully bring some very interesting people in. Mm-hmm. We're going to be just like the Working Class Bowhunter podcast. We're going to be unfiltered and just have a good time. I mean, we just want to have fun and have some entertainment here. So.
Yeah, and then for everybody that listens, twice a week on the Working Class Bowhunter platform, you can look at this. Listen or don't, but please listen. We'd like you to, but it's a bonus content for you.
Bonus.
So
we like bonus.
Yeah, just bonus content. So this is the first one. We're having fun, and I'll let you make the proper introductions here with our guests.
Sure.
Here at the table and
via
the internet.
We got on Zoom. We got Larry Bloomquist, and Larry is, in my eyes, the godfather of the taxidermy industry, and I know he smiles and laughs at that. But we'll go through a lot of the great things that he has done for our industry and a lot of the great things he's going to continue to do. And then we've got, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but we got some gentlemen in here from FSI. It's the new foam system that we've been working hand in hand together to develop for our industry. And I'm going to let Mike kick it off. So,
my name is Mike Chambers. I'm the sales guy at FSI. We've been working with Sam hand in hand on developing a new foam system for the market, specifically for this market, and one that's going to be here for years to come, and is good for the environment and eco-friendly and all the things that as outdoorsmen we should care about. It doesn't just end when you shoot your animal; it goes all the way through to you getting it back and hanging it on the wall, and so. We've been around for 51 years now.
Yeah, 1972. Yeah.
Family owned, second generation owner. It's been one of the greatest companies I've worked for. I
think the greatest.
It's getting there. When I was young, I worked for a really great company, but I also worked in the plant, so I'm jaded by that a little bit.
Well, speaking of plant, we got Raul. We got Raul with us. Raul, excuse me, I don't remember your last name.
Oh, it's Dacomba, Raul Dacomba. So
I wouldn't have been able to say that anyway.
It's
the effort
one of
that
those
counts.
odd enough that you can still pronounce it. And then I find myself kind of saying like Dacomba, instead of Dacomba. They say Dacomba, I'm like, well, what is that?
Yeah.
So Raul and his team have been working hand in hand with our team up at G2 to develop this foam under Mike's guidance, of course, of direction of what we're going to take this thing. So it's kind of some fun stuff. But we'll give it back to Mike and talk a little bit about FSI.
Yeah, like I was saying, we've been in the business for 51 years now. This company, family owned. We're in the second generation ownership right now. They have a very long history of donating money and sponsoring things and doing all kinds of stuff for the St. Louis area and then across the United States for different outdoor organizations. In fact, this is the only company I've ever worked for, and I've worked for two big ones, where we actually have a director of philanthropy. So we have somebody on payroll whose sole job is to give the boss's money away.
Wow.
I like
true.
that.
That's got to be a scary job.
I didn't know that
Given away correctly.
I didn't know that existed. Otherwise, I would have applied for that job.
Yeah.
It seems like it's a lot easier than sales, just giving money away.
Yeah.
But so, we've donated and spent time with lots of outdoor organizations. And this kind of, falls into that in terms of giving to a specific industry and one that the owner cares about because he's a very avid outdoorsman. If you come into our office, we have at any given time at least 3 dogs running around, sometimes 5, because it's okay to bring your dogs to work. And the owner brings his hunting dogs in, and upstairs, our conference room, where what's going to be the big area, there's mounts all over the place. There's wood cabinets. Don't put this out there. I don't want to get robbed, but we have the things that belong in wood cabinets upstairs in wood cabinets.
Yeah.
And mounts all over the place. And it's been a great company to work for. And not only from that aspect, because when I started here just a little bit a year ago, I said to Raul and to my boss, and I'm like, God, this is one industry that I've worked in the past, and I really liked, working with them because most of the people are pretty cool to work with.
Yeah.
And, I explained to my relationship with Sam, which I don't know, started
A lot of years
how
ago.
many years ago, Sam. It was a lot of years ago. But it was like the 3rd year that you and I had known each other before we actually talked about what we did for a living. Because we were just bear hunting and drinking beer and having a good time and
See, that's
bear hunting.
better. That's cool.
And
It is neat.
It was the 3rd year before we actually talked anything about what we did. And he was like, "Oh, I'm a taxidermist." I'm like, "No shit, I sell taxidermy foam."
That's how it went.
We should, yeah.
Over a bottle of rum at a campfire in Nipigon, Ontario.
See, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, that's how the relationship between Sam and I started. And Sam has been very good for me. That was the next year, Larry, like I told you, we went to the World Taxidermy Show, and Sam literally walked me around and introduced me to everybody I needed to know. And, the company I was working for at the time did a great job, and we took a lot of business and did a lot of good things. And, I like to think I helped Sam out a little bit. But
You helped me amazing.
He helps me out more, I think, than I help him. But like I said, when we started this idea here, Raul, who was the R&D director for the rigid side of our business, I've given these guys a couple of what I thought would be impossible tasks, right? Because you always want to shoot for the moon and then hope you get, halfway to the moon.
Yeah.
And so I gave him a pretty tall task on what the foam needed to do, how it needed to perform, and it needed to be eco-friendly and nothing getting phased out. Because as Sam knows, that's one of the things that happens in this industry. The government gets involved and says, "Oh, we don't like that chemical anymore. You can't use it. We have to find a replacement." And every time you have that happen, it's like solvent, right? If you remember back in the day, MEK, methylene chloride, great solvents, cleaned everything. Terrible for your hands, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now they want you to use orange juice, which is great for your hands, but doesn't clean a damn thing, right? And so it's kind of what the taxidermy industry has been going through. 30 years ago, when the industry was using R11 and R12 freons in the foam, you just kind of needed to mix the foam and get it near the tool and leave it in for about what was recommended, and out came a magnificent part.
Yeah.
Now you have to have temperature control on the chemicals, on the tool, and all kinds of stuff.
Humidity control.
Yeah, to make a good part. So, and every time the government gets involved, you have to start all over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you have to figure out what is, what you can use and how to make that work.
You guys are avoiding the giant pain in the ass, which is the government, by doing it right the first time. So hopefully you don't have to change something.
Well, and
every
that's
time.
the theory behind what we have now, right?
Yeah,
So, I don't know how many years ago when they came up and developed the EcoMate blowing agent.
It was early 2000s, dude. It was probably like 2002 when it's actually in the market.
Okay.
So you're talking like 20-some years ago now. And, this goes back into the government stuff, right? We're in a transition period right now. So, without going too far into, the boring side of things. So basically, if you want to think about it from the climate standpoint, right, you hear about CFCs, bad, right? So that's what the foams were blown with. So that's the expansion agent, if you will, the foaming agent, right? So what happened was they said, okay, you know what, the CFC is bad. We find that it breaks off into chlorine, and chlorine radicals destroy something crazy. I think one chlorine molecule destroyed like a million ozone molecules, right? So then you have like the big ozone hole, the whole gap. So then you transition out, right? You went to CFCs, then to HCFCs, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, then to HFCs, hydrofluorocarbons, which you find this in your car, for example, right? For the refrigeration part, like 134A, you might have heard of it.
Yep.
So that's HFC. And then you got into the new blowing agents, right? So ours is in the new generation. It's basically a non-fluorinated molecule, ours is. Then you have the new ones that are called HFOs or HCFO, hydrochlorofluoroolefins, or hydrofluoroolefins, right? So nowadays you have the government saying, hey, yeah, we're probably going to ban these. It all started with, I think it was an incident in Minnesota, I want to say. There some molecules that are fluorinated, just happen to be bioaccumulative, and they're really bad chemicals, right? But now you get the legislation saying, hey, yeah, we're going to cover this and just going to, like, they're all bad.
Yeah.
You know, so now there's a lot of definitions depending on where you're at, saying like, yeah, under this definition, you can't use the new stuff that we already proved to be safe.
See, okay,
So-
you're talking about all this. That was like another language for, I think, for me and a lot of people, which I love hearing it. But like, what's interesting, I feel like I'm the gap here because you guys are in this industry. I'm in the hunting, talking business. So I'm like a customer and kind of in it a little bit. So I'm thinking about the person who has no idea, like the complications behind what goes into the product to get me my deer head back.
The thing that's really crazy in our industry, especially with the taxidermist, all of the bitching and moaning and groaning about they have with foam. They don't understand, like some of the big companies, I'll see a post that I can't get a pin in it. I can't do this, can't do that. They don't understand. We as manufacturers, we don't have anything under our control there to make sure that pin will go in there. And every product is a little bit different. Correct?
Oh, yeah. And all that to say really is just that government mandates, we're forced to change, right? The alternatives may not be as forgiving, right? So going to that's what the EcoForm, right? We put a blowing agent that we know is no problems regulatory, so we know it'll be here for a long time. But yeah, I mean, like you guys said, I mean, every transition, it became something very forgiving. You can mold the foam, no problem. Now you have to get, very detailed and like more focused on like, all right, you really got to pay attention to how you're doing it. And it's just because the technology we have, we can only do so much, right?
Yeah. And then you think like from a consumer base, like a guy who just drops his deer off at Old Barn Taxidermy and gets it back on a G2 form, and a year later. It's a good thing he doesn't have to think about all this stuff, but it's, when guys want good quality work on good quality materials, like there's a cost to it because, I mean, what you guys are talking about does not sound cheap to keep up with like the regulation, unless somebody wants an old school deer head. Like paper mache back in the day, or what's like how crazy it's like from where it was to where it is now. It's so insane. And people who aren't in the taxidermy industry don't have to think about it for good reason. But it's interesting as hell.
It is interesting.
Well, and that particular conversation is really geared towards the people that are making forms and parts. But it's like you said, it's good for the customer to know what's going on there because, they're the ones that are paying the price, right? And so as costs are going up, you know what it's like. People gripe about everything. They want it for the same price. Oh, and it needs to be the same quality or better.
Yeah.
Well, that's just not how the world works, right?
Right,
so,
in general, yeah.
And so if you look at, like, from the manufacturing side, the benefit of our foam is that it's not going to be phased out. The one that everybody's currently using that we're not selling is going to be phased out at some point. They're already getting that whole regulation ready to go. So, if we get people to switch to us, they won't be forced to switch again in another year, 2 years, 5 years. Would I say more than 5 years? No, because you know how the government is, right?
Yeah, I'm sure politics kind of roll into that as well.
Depending what happens in November is going to be huge, right?
Not to get into it, but...
Yeah. If the election goes one way, our whole chemical system might be banned by the end of next year. If it goes the other way, we might be able to use R11 and R12 and methylene chloride again. I mean, it's just that drastic of a swing. It's just that drastic of a swing. So, but from the consumer standpoint, if a guy shoots a nice deer and he's taking it to the taxidermist, most of the time he's looking through a catalog of forms and saying, I want that one. And it's hard to pick through a magazine because you don't get to feel it. Not that they would even know what to feel like, but picking something from a magazine is not, as easy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about this at least 10 times today. And if I don't get the 10th time, kick me. It doesn't matter what color the goddamn foam is. There's a huge misnomer in this industry that the lighter color of the foam, the better it is, and that's complete bullshit. The color of the foam has no bearing on the performance of the foam whatsoever. There's 5 manufacturers in the world that make the A-side component, or half of what the chemicals are. And depending on which one you formulate your system with, it can make a different color. Doesn't mean it performs better or worse. The color just has, unless it's, bright, shitty red, you've got a big problem, but you'll know that, right?
Yeah.
So, we looked at making white foams and we can put titanium dioxide in and I can make you a snow white foam. It's going to cost you 4 times as much because that stuff's not cheap, right? And it provides nothing to the performance of the foam. So everybody out there who is listening, who has this idea that foam is better if it's lighter, just stop. It's not true. It has no bearing on it.
I think that the theory is the darker the foam, the harder it rasps. But that's not true.
It's not. No.
That's not true at all. It's just, like you guys said before, like in our manufacturing
the harder
plant, the harder it is to rasp, to get that mannequin prepped so that glue will hold that skin to that hide.
Yeah, I might have you guys break down some taxidermy verbiage here and there, just so anyone who's just listening out of curiosity who's not a taxidermist can kind of follow along.
No, I would love to. But in our manufacturing facility, like you said, that A side, depending on what A side that we get, we have to change gears, but we know that after the first pour. We might have to change it a little bit or one way or the other. But we do what we call a thumbnail test. We go in there, if we can scratch it with our thumbnail, we know that the taxidermist, will be able to rasp that off easy. But I think a lot of that too hard of foam, I think that's operator error when they're pouring the part. I don't think it has nothing to do with the foam. Am I correct?
Well, it's operator error, and it's an error in how that form was made. But not naming any companies, it also depends on their QC process as well. Some companies will allow stuff like that to go out. Some companies make it a second, right? It it depends. And, not against anything against the guys that let it go, but that's what you get. But the biggest thing, if you look at, in Sam, your shop, you spend, your guy spends an entire day, Tanner, making parts and puts them on the shelf. And they go on the shelf one color. And in 2 days, they're a different color because of the UV lights. So again, whatever color they start out with doesn't matter. They're going to yellow under the UV. Every manufacturer that puts them on a shelf and, is going to have some yellowing to it from the UV. And the thing that I've asked everybody that has, mentioned color to me is, what color is the foam on that mount right there?
Ain't got a clue.
Exactly. It doesn't freaking matter.
Yeah.
You see this, it's going to be this, much better. What's it going to do? It's going to hang better. It's going to look more like a deer. It's something that started years and years ago and it just has never gone away. So
interesting.
That's time one.
Time one.
Okay. That's cool for me to hear because I never even thought that would have been on the radar. I've never even thought about the color of it.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. So, wow. To the point where we know some manufacturers that are add and dye. We know one that puts a little water in his foam. Everybody's got some different quirks and techniques they use to build their part, especially in the smaller mom and pop supply houses. G2's small. We're very small. We're micro size. but there's some really nice micro-sized suppliers out there, and some of them mix them in bags. I mean, we've seen all kind of crazy stuff that works for them.
Yeah, and you can make good forms, a million different ways. Hand mixing it with a drill, doing the bag mix. You could have a $140,000 machine that mixes it for you, and machinery, all the way down from that level. And so, again, it's still a good form. You only need to do a couple of things to make a good form. You've got to have it on the right ratio, and you got to mix it well, and then get it in your tool in time. And if you do that, you're going to make a good part.
Yep. And that's where Raul's been working with our guys in our manufacturing to build that product so it works the way it needs to work for our industry to get inside that tool.
Well, and Raul's going to kick me under the table now because I'm going to let a secret out. When we started this project, I told them that everybody in industry was pulling their deer heads in 20 minutes. That was bullshit. Not a single person was pulling me in 20 minutes. But I wanted to see what they could do. Most everybody is pulling them in 30 minutes, some 45 hour, depending on how their production is. Well, he fucking did it. And so even when we go and run trials, I'm like, yeah, you guys can pull this up in 20 minutes. They're like, shit, we can't work that fast. Oh, all right.
So that really speeds the manufacturing time up.
Yeah,
because you got this
Yeah.
part, it's upside down, it's in some kind of a vise of some sort. You mix this foam up, you put it in there, and then you got to put back pressure on it. Well, it builds that back pressure, and that's what gives you your poundage and your and all that. But now, you've got, with the older foams, we had, we set a little alarm clock. We'd set an alarm clock for 45 minutes. Well, now we've got all these mount stands, so the Tanner would go to the next one, to the next one, next one.
Yep.
Well, now he can pull them a lot quicker, so it adds
Like
to your
doubling your
production.
output, pretty much,
It adds to your production. It's actually going to add to employment, because I think we're to the point where we're going to be adding. We've already added a part-time gentleman, but I think we're going to need another
Are you mad at
full-time.
me for that, Raul?
Just because it's
awesome.
faster,
Yeah.
He's not going to believe me the next
The
time I bring a
moonshot, right?
project.
What the moonshot?
The next project,
Yeah.
he's going to be like, no, that's not true.
Yeah. Like you checking and like pulling a Google on you. Just to make
Maybe
sure.
like trust but
Yeah.
verify. Oh,
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly. Right.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. That's cool. I can see. Well, good on you. Good work.
Awesome.
It
Well,
was
thanks, guys.
great
It's not
work.
all
It
me;
was
it's the
great
whole
work.
team.
Yeah.
And frankly, I want to thank Sam for letting us in there too. Right? It's not as common to have the chemists on site. They're like, oh my god, this.
Yeah.
They're gonna, pick on me, like whatever. But no, it was really good for us to see because we're on site, and you'd be amazed how many times, when we haven't been there, the salesman, and no offense, it's just
Oh, I
They're
get
sales
it.
guys.
the interpretation, right? They say
Yeah.
like, well, I needed to do this. And then we hear, okay, he needs this. We go take it back, and he's like, yeah, it's not exactly what I asked for. I'm like, well, what the hell, man? So us being there, and thank you, Sam, for opening your doors, it was really cool to see it firsthand, exactly how they make it. Get the comments and like, okay, this is exactly my pain point, right? So what can we do better? And being there and just seeing exactly what he means and like ask clarifying questions. What is it? Okay, I see what you're singing now.
Yeah.
Let's get it back to the lab.
And that's
it's been
what a
great.
lot of people don't understand is, it's not just a hunk of plastic that you put the hide over. There's science behind that.
Yeah.
Like a lot of science, and on our end, and then even on the manufacturing side, right? So there's, you basically, Sam and all the other form manufacturers have mini chemistry sets in their plant, right? And Raul did a good job of making the chemistry, and now we're just trying to get it into everybody's hands and do it right. So
So that's what brings Larry to the table.
that's right.
So me and Mike were talking, what's the best way to make a splash so everybody knows who FSI is? And I said, well, the World Taxidermy Show is in the horizon and it's coming up quick. And he said, well, get me a meeting. So I called Larry and talked to, I think I talked to Kathy first, didn't I, Larry? If I remember
You
correctly.
probably did.
Kathy is Larry's better half, if to say so. I mean, behind every great man, there's a better woman. So she's a very lovely lady. But anyhow, we got together, and Larry actually flew to Chicago. Him and his right hand, Ken Edwards, right? That's Ken. Yep. They flew into to St. Louis rather, and actually met us at the factory. So it was quite a neat deal, and we got everybody together, and before you know it, FSI is one of the major title sponsors for the World Taxidermy Show.
Very awesome.
So if they didn't know who FSI was before, they know who they are now. Thanks to Larry. So,
well, first of all, thank you for asking me to be a part of this podcast, and I want to give a little of my history. And I've listened to everything that y'all been talking about. I have 30 years as a professional taxidermist. Started when I was 11 years old, back in the late 50s. And I started sculpting. I got into the supply company business, like Sam. I worked with urethanes when they first came on the market back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And to my knowledge, some of the first taxidermy forms produced was around 63 or 64. Several people take credit for bringing polyurethane foam into the taxidermy industry. Today, without question, polyurethane forms are 70% of the process of doing taxidermy. And I think that the people that watch this podcast, they got a lot of the chemical information because it was in, I guess, the 80s when the fluorocarbons and the EPA came down and started making big changes on polyurethane. And I was actually in the supply business at that time. You had some that had a skin so tough you couldn't put a nail in it, some that were soft, and it was all regulated by the chemistry. I just happened to have a minor in chemistry, which helped me kind of understand the processes going into this manufacturing part. But the importance of polyurethane in our industry is monumental. Every mount and form you see, 99% of them is on a polyurethane form. Hunters, fishermen, they look at their mount, how beautiful it is, and it's what inside it that makes it look as good as it does. Now, there's other things that go into the process. But if you want an analogy, maybe a mannequin in a store, department store, and you can put a tight T-shirt on it, and if the mannequin isn't anatomically right and a good physique, the shirt won't look good. And that's the same thing that we have to do as sculptors in sculpting taxidermy forms and then in producing them with a foam product. Earlier, you were talking about the rasping, and most people, a hunter's going to say, well, what is that? It's part of the process to make that skin glue to the polyurethane itself. Most forms have some type of molds have separators in them that will allow the urethane to release the form. And the reason we rasp a form is to give it a rough side so that the glue that goes on it allows the skin to adhere where we place it in skin adjustment. So and foam is so much easier to alter. We used to make forms out of red resin paper, basically a paper mache type process with plastic. And when I started, that's what we had. And then one company came out with plastic forms, which was a white plastic like you see on a milk carton. It was a little thicker. And then the other thing that came out were fiberglass forms. Some of the big mannequins were made with 2 layers of fiberglass. You could actually go in with a pair of shears and cut it and alter it. But foam forms and their density and how we can adjust and alter them is very important. So the importance of urethane in this industry is big. I want to thank FSI and Mike Chambers and their group over there. They're a wonderful company. As Sam mentioned, I made a visit up there, and I have visited a lot of form companies and chemistry labs that do that type work. There's none better. They have come forward and allowed us to do things this year at the World Championships that we may have not been able to do because of financial reasons. And they are a big part financially and as a title sponsor, and the importance of the foam product in the taxidermy industry. So we are super happy to have them with us. I kind of thought we'd be talking a little more about taxidermy, and I don't know of a better way, Rick, to get that started than maybe some questions that you may have about the World Show or about taxidermy and the actual use of it.
I have a couple of questions about the show and taxidermy in general, but one thing I want to go back to, Larry, is you talked about, I mentioned the paper mache thing early. I'm pretty ignorant to that, and you talked about that was like the first style mounts. How long would it take you to make like a paper mache form? Like how much time would you have in just the form?
It takes 24 hours minimum because it has to go through a drying period. And we used to have molds made out of plaster. Today, most molds are made from fiberglass, same thing they do when they manufacture boats. But most of our molds used to be made of thin plaster with a burlap layer over it. And in the molds, we'd go in and shellac them to seal them. And then the plaster, the red resin paper, was laid out in a plaster type glue. A lot of times dextrin was added to the plaster. And plaster repair sets up really quick. So you have temperature working against you. If it's cold, it sets up slower. If it's warm, it sets up faster. And the same way with polyurethane. But that layer of plaster, red resin paper, and on large forms like elk or moose, we would actually put burlap in there also as a binder. And once you got that process done, you could do it you could do the layering process in about 15 minutes. It didn't take that long. But then you have to put it together and let it set up. Some molds were made where you would make each side, let it cure, and then cut the edges, the rim off of it, and then put it together with a plaster layer, kind of like they do a plaster cast. But because of drying time, it would take at least one day, and a lot of times even several days, to get the moisture out of the plaster to use it. Urethane foam, well, all of them are bought. Very few taxidermists manufacture their own forms. Some of the very big companies do some form making, but most of the forms in our business come from manufacturers like Sam. So we get them in a box and we're ready to go.
Thank God for polyurethane is what I'm hearing.
In the process of making one, I know when I was in the supply business, I had about 350 fiberglass molds, and we had turnstiles, 4 turnstiles that handled 6 molds each. And as we'd go through the process of waxing, clamping them together, it would take about a little over an hour to go around, and that allowed the one you poured an hour ago to cure enough inside the form where you just start the process over. Mm-hmm. Temperature has a big factor. I know the guys up north, they have to keep their areas warm because the urethane will dry so slow. Heat can affect it from almost curing too fast. If you open a mold before the urethane forms, it'll bust. I've had them bust in half before. So
is everybody else, Larry. Don't feel bad.
We do a few.
Okay.
and you probably had foam on your ceiling, right? Because I don't know that I've been to a single plant in my entire career that molds urethane of any kind that they haven't got foam on the ceiling somehow. From overfilling a tool or pressing the wrong button or
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter. I mean, 35-foot ceilings and there's foam up there. So
Yeah.
It's
So,
true.
but anyway, it takes about an hour to make a urethane form. It'd take us 3 days to do old plaster form.
Yeah.
That's a long
To me, it's cool to hear about like the old school ways, you know, and then like you were saying, you've seen and used and lived through the progression of the product. So it's like as that after that phased out, you're probably like, thank God we're not messing with that anymore.
Well, it was a mess, and I've now mold building. You get back into fiberglass and a lot of the chemicals that
Yeah.
are used in acetone to clean up, and you've got to be careful with it. But taxidermists, once you get the cured product of a urethane form, you can cut it, chop it, work with it, do whatever you want without any worries about chemical problems. All those problems occur during the process.
Cool. Well, we should probably transition to the show,
I bet.
and then yeah, I'll just let you take it from there because I've never been. I think it'd be cool to go.
Yeah.
I'm excited to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, it's like I just like give a breakdown of what it
Never been.
is, and
Yeah.
I can tell you from just a hunter standpoint, the first one I went to, just walking around and seeing the amazing mounts that were there. Like there's a few that I just will never forget. And one was that grizzly bear that was in the fake water that had like 5 or 6 salmon, looked like they were jumping out of the water.
Now,
and this
just-
grizzly bear was, swatting at one of them. And
Now that just for full disclosure, that was my ex-wife's firm.
nice.
yeah.
way to
That's
rub it
the
in.
Wildlife Gallery.
They did a great job.
They
Sam,
did.
Sorry.
They do amazing work. Amazing work. But no, in competition wise for taxidermy, you got your state associations. Usually, doesn't every state pretty much have one, Larry? The state association show.
There, at my last count, there were 39 associations. So some of the associations you have, like the New England Association. It's Vermont, Connecticut.
So it's multiple states.
Right.
Coming.
It's a few states. Maine's part of it.
Yeah.
But there's 39 associations, to my knowledge.
Okay.
And of course, we have 50 states. Hawaii doesn't have one. Alaska had one at one time, but they're so far away that it just seems like the population density up there doesn't make it happen.
It'd just be Russell.
Right, Russell 90.
It'd just be Russell. Yeah.
He Russell put it together. So
So you
and
got your. Go ahead, Larry.
He did at one time. He put on a pretty big show up there, but it was more of a SCI type show than it was taxidermy.
Yeah. So from the state level, you have like an NTA or a national level. It's the National Taxidermy Association. They have and that's kind of it's. I mean, everybody wants to win state titles. I mean, that's really really cool. National title, that's huge. But the caveat, the goal for any taxidermist that is driven to be the best is to be a world champion. I mean, that's the top. It's the top.
Yeah.
I mean, and Larry's been putting on this show for how many years, Larry?
35.
35 years.
Yeah.
Did you start the World Taxidermy Show?
No, I did not. Bob Williamson, who started, he was the CEO of Wildlife Artist Supply Company, which we call Wasco. And he started the first world show in Atlanta, Georgia in 1983. And I was actually a judge, the whitetail judge, myself and Dick Christopher from Maine or Connecticut, somewhere up in there. We were the first whitetail judges at that show, and I judged the first 7 shows, and it was held every year. Now, since I have purchased the show back in 1989, we've produced 17 world championships, which is held every 2 years. We've produced 2 of them in Europe. All the others have been here in the United States. And the Midwest is the mecca of the taxidermy industry. without question, owning a magazine. We own the largest taxidermy publication in the world. It goes to, I think, 28 different countries. And usually we'll have as many as 25 to 30 countries represented at a world show. But I knew for it to be a true world show, I had to produce one in Europe, which I was able to actually produce 2 different shows over there. And the Europeans excel in small taxidermy work. In the United States, we excel in all areas of taxidermy, but especially in large mammal taxidermy. And so I forgot the original question I was asked. I got off train.
Well, I just want to know, if you had started it, but I didn't know that was started by the gentleman with Wasco.
Yeah, so. Yeah, it was Bob Williamson actually did, and I bought the rights to the World Championship in 1989. And here's the thing: I own a large trade publication called Breakthrough, and it's a taxidermy trade journal. And if you look at most trade shows, they're sponsored by magazine publications. The 2 work together, they feed off of each other. You're able to market the program through it. And that's the way it works best. So wife and
I think one of the greatest things about your show from a taxidermist standpoint is the amount of different companies that get behind you and come and bring their product lines. I mean, that's amazing.
There's 4 elements that make the World Show what it is. Number 1's a competition where people come together to compete, and the decisions are made by 28 judges. Most state shows are bringing in 4 judges. National shows are bringing in around 6 or 7 or 8. It takes 28 judges to judge a world show. We will have anywhere from, in Europe, we had 450 entries at most 2 shows over there. Here, I've had as many as 700 entries, and that's a lot of entries to go through and evaluate. Mm-hmm. But I keep losing my train of thought. That's because I'm old.
Well, I have a question talking about like the judges, because the whole time I'm thinking it's like, okay, if you want to be a world champion, what makes a world champion taxidermist? Like when you're judging, what's being judged and how?
Okay.
And maybe that opens up a whole other.
Let me tell you. No, judging's just like an umpire in baseball. He makes a decision, and he can look bad or good. But a judge has to be very qualified. I don't hire judges unless they've had probably 5 to 10 years of experience in judging. And usually to be a judge, you have to be a exceptionally good taxidermist. You have to know your subject. And most of the judges are specialty judges. And what I mean by that, we have fish judges, we have bird judges, and then sometimes we get waterfowl judges separate from upland game bird. And then, of course, you have mammals. And then you have small mammals and large mammals. And some judges are taxidermists. They love large mammal work. They love doing bears. They love doing life-size deer, African, you name it. And then others prefer to work with small game. And actually, in the last few years, our small mammal categories has been one of the largest attended, competed in categories we've had. It used to be waterfowl. We used to have anywhere from 80 to 100 upland game birds and waterfowl. Today, we have that many small game. The other one, of course, is white-tailed deer. We have judges that excel in white-tailed taxidermy. The judges that are judging whitetail this year, they have both won 2 world championships. And they have been judging for the last 5 to 10 years. So they're very qualified judges. And the master division, there are different divisions at the World Show. We have an amateur division, we have a youth division, we have a professional division, and then we have the master division. And then we have a Master of Masters division, and that's taxidermists who have already won a world title. And it's also a competition where judges can compete because most of the judges are past world champions.
Very cool.
And from our perspective, right, just being hunters,
Yeah.
the difference between the stuff that's at the competition versus what you and I are getting on the wall is night and day. And I didn't really realize that till I was walking around with Sam, and I was like, man, look at that deer. It's freaking awesome. And Sam was like, no. And I'm like, what? He's like, mm-mm. I'm like, I don't even want to know, because if that was mine, I'd have been happier in hell, right? So the amount of detail and time that gets spent on these competition pieces is astronomical.
Yeah.
I mean, just astronomical. And so therefore, it gets beyond what the layman sees. Like, to us, we think it's, awesome, no matter what. But somehow these judges are, this eyelid wasn't curled enough, or something like that. But that we're not seeing as the hunter.
Yeah.
But it's cool to see some of those pieces that are in those competitions.
Right. And that doesn't mean that, like, what you're getting in, from my perspective, like what you're getting in a commercial taxidermy, like you take it in, you just want a good looking deer mount. Like, analogy would be like if you order a sports car and you just buy it factory and it's badass how it is, but then you go in and like overhaul it and add all this custom work and make it fast as you can. Would that be a fair analogy for someone who doesn't understand? Like,
that would be a fair analogy.
Still good to both ways, but like this level taxidermy that you're talking is just a different type.
And nobody would want to, I mean, again, from the layman, us hunters, everything that I've ever gotten done looks fantastic, right? It's the small things that these guys are looking for that we necessarily don't care about. And I don't know, Sam, what's the difference in hours in between just say mounting a whitetail for me as a consumer versus doing a competition whitetail?
Well, everybody's different, but a typical commercial mount, a lot of shops are doing one a day. In that environment, if you competition piece, I don't know, I'll have a week in it, don't you think, Larry? I mean, and I don't win, so
there are some pieces out there that have hundreds of hours, and the reason is, once you compete in the master division, you can use a commercial form, for example, that Sam sells, but if you sculpture your own head, and you have to document this with some pictures to let the judge know. But if you go in and you sculpture your own form, then you've got to build a mold of it. Then you've got to make it. And then you've got to mount it. Just the mounting process, an average whitetail deer has about 8 to 10 hours work in it. Depends upon repairs needed and the type of mount being done. And a competition piece would have anywhere from maybe 40, 50, 60 hours, and in some cases as much as 100. And I know for a fact that the whitetail pieces that win at the World Show, most of them are custom made and built totally by the individual, and they have over 100 hours in the piece, including habitat, which is very elaborate and very artistically composed by most of the people that win. So competition taxidermy, and here's the thing, and it's so true what Mike just said, that the normal hunter will look at a deer here and a competition deer here, and they really don't understand what's different about this one from that one.
Exactly.
It's the very fine details, and I'm talking eyelids that have nodulation built back in them. You lose that nodulation when it goes through the tanning process and drying process. You have to go back and add each little nodulation to the eyelids. The same thing with the nose. You have to rebuild the texture of it. So in commercial work, some of those things aren't necessarily skipped because most good commercial work today does have very well textured eyelids and noses. But the fine details of inside the nostril opening, the inner part of the frontal eye, and the nictitating membrane, all of that has been incorporated into competition pieces. And probably, I'm going to say, 5 more hours of finishing work and doing colorations around the eye, the nose, inside the ear even. All the nodulation in the ears got to be shown in a competition piece because that's how you separate this taxidermist from that taxidermist.
Yeah, and no average hunter is going to pay
No.
to have, a competition piece hanging on their wall.
Well,
It's just,
yeah.
maybe your last guest with the helicopter.
Yeah.
He might be paying
Jimmy
for all
John.
those things.
Yeah, but even then, he's just like us. He just wants a good looking mount. He's, especially, guys that are just killing a lot of deer and it's going to be 12 foot up, in your cabin. It's like, you're not going to see it anyway. But I'm fascinated with the whole thought of this because I was an apprentice taxidermist and with a couple of buddies. I actually did Joe Meter's week-long game head course.
That's my other hero.
Yeah, and so I haven't seen him since I did it. I was young, young, but it was 12 years ago. And that's when he held up a copy of Breakthrough and he goes, if you're going to be a taxidermist, you need to subscribe to this. You need to have this magazine. This is the magazine of magazines. And I'm like, that's my introduction to Breakthrough. So I've always looked at Breakthrough as being like, that's the top of the game,
It's the top.
So, and I know that, and I'm not a taxidermist. I'm familiar with it because I'm friends with Sam and everybody at Old Barn and other taxidermists. So it's relevant in my head, of being the top of the mountain for taxidermy. So,
I think the biggest thing with taxidermy and with the competition is it does require you to elevate your game. You will learn what you are doing wrong. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about, buying a Ferrari earlier. I mean, taxidermy is the same way. You got an entry-level taxidermist that, doesn't necessarily know any of the finer points. And, he's got 15 friends that he's going to mount their deer, right? Well, if he bones up and goes to the state association show even, he's going to take that piece and put it up there. And I don't know of any other industry where you take your best work and you put it in front of your peers to tear it down. I don't know of any other industry that does that. Yes. I mean, it almost sounds crazy.
Yeah, it sounds a little wild when you say it like that.
Yeah,
but
I mean, you're taking your best work and you're putting it in front of your competitors or your peers or your mentors, and they tell you what's wrong with it. But I tell everybody, our shop is because of my state association, the quality that we put out. I met the right people. They taught me the right thing. You just keep elevating your game. And like Larry said, there's several different levels to compete at. The amateur comes in. He's probably mounted 8, 9, maybe 1. You don't know. But then, you got your professional level. You got your masters and your masters and masters. Each one of them levels, they start grading that work harder. Because everything is on a grading scale. The big difference between like a state association show and a world show, everybody at the state association show gets an A, B, C, or D. Whether it's the masters, the professional, the amateur, you're competing against yourself. You're competing for a grade. So a blue ribbon is an A. You would have got an A. A red ribbon, you got a B. So now the caveat there is being the best A.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
So you actually win your division. So, you win your best of division whitetail, per se. You had the best A. And again, it's on a scoring range. So a 90 to 100 is an A, right? So there might be a lot of 90s, but there's only one 91. And that's the guy that got the best A. So we work ourselves up. Like when I started competing, I was in the professional division and I got a C. My very first deer was a C. I thought it was an A. I'm like you. I was a consumer. I looked at it. Oh my God, I'm perfect.
I'm the best.
Yeah. And I get there and I just get my ass handed to me, you know. So I'm thinking, well, I got to be better than that. So I went to the seminars, and I know Larry started talking about the 4 legs of what makes his show so successful. But seminars, in my opinion, as a professional taxidermist, elevates your game amazingly, because typically whoever Larry or State Association show brings in as a judge, they will give you a seminar, and they're going to go up, and there's no secrets today, Larry. I mean, they tell everything. Back in the 90s, even when I started, it was all secretive. I mean, nobody told anybody anything.
Totally secretive. If you tried to go in a taxidermy shop back in the 60s,
they'd run you out.
But they'd run you out.
Yep.
You wasn't going in there.
Yep.
And that's changed. Here's one of the things about secrets. There are a few secrets out there, Sam. But once they win, those secrets come out.
Yep.
And it's just different techniques of finishing, how you airbrush around an eye, molding techniques. How do you make something artificial look fleshy and real? And when the guy finds out, I'm going to use this technique till I win, and they win.
Yeah.
Larry, is the color of the foam have any bearing on the final performance of the Master of Masters?
Well, no, it doesn't.
Okay.
I thought he was going to counteract your point.
We're number 2.
Yeah, number 2.
I have 8 more times to say that this show.
No, the skin is too opaque. It's going to cover up any color of the foam. And so, no, the answer is no. But, and here's the other thing about competition. Once you learn and understand how to mount a whitetail that looks alive, that looks alert, and doesn't have sleepy eyes, or doesn't have little uneven eyelids. Once you learn how to do that, you can do it every time, even in your commercial work.
100%.
Today's commercial work is top rate. I must say, in the last 30 years, it's gone from here up to here. And 90% of the shops out there produce top-notch commercial work. And the normal hunter can look at that commercial work and competition work, and they really won't see the difference. They won't understand that. But he can do that same thing in 8 hours that the competition guy took 50 hours to do. And you can't afford to pay that for that competition piece, but you're not going to see the difference. That's why commercial work is what it is. And most commercial work, the average price for a deer head today is around $750 to $1,000. It depends where you go and who you go to. If the likelihood, if you're paying less than $750 for a deer head today, you better watch out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Might not get that head that you want to look at every day. And I'm just saying, that's how it works.
Yeah.
All industries and professions have the same thing. You got good plumbers, bad plumbers, good electricians, some that aren't as good. So,
the best analogy, I think, Larry, for me is the tattoo industry. Like, I have a lot of tattoos. I have some tattoos. I'm like, man, maybe I didn't know at the time. And I think, I have deer heads from when I was younger that I look at. Like at home, I look at the ears and just look how it's done. I'm like, and it's right next to one of Sam's deer heads. And I'm just like, if I would have known better. But you go to like an Illinois deer classic or an Iowa deer classic where it's not a taxidermy competition. It's just a showcase for deer shot that year. And you go there and, excuse my language, but you look up, you'd be like, fuck, that thing is rough. It don't even look like a deer. And then, there it's very scalable because you see good and bad right next to each other.
Well, and I think from the consumer standpoint, the easiest way to weed out a good portion of those is if you shot a duck and you want it mounted and they tell you can have it back in 3 days, that's a problem.
The timing is
If you drop off a whitetail and on Monday and they say you can pick it up on Friday, also a red flag. I mean, we have the suburb that I used to live in has a taxidermy shop in there that I had a buddy take a duck to, and I was like, Paul, don't take it there. Paul, don't take it. There's a beautiful wood duck. And he got it back, and he's like, see, it looks fine. It was a matter of a month, I think, before the skin started pulling off. Like, you could see the fat that was behind the skin that didn't get scraped off. And, he paid, I don't know what it was, $175, and he got it back in 3 days. Like, it's what you get, So there are some easy red flags to pick up on. But
I think if anybody complains about it, they just don't know.
They don't know.
They just don't know.
They don't know. We try to educate, especially, Larry's talking about price-wise. The lower economy mounts, I mean, there's still guys doing for $350, but they're a $350 mount, and I tell everybody that I talk to, there's a taxidermist for every budget, but it depends on what you want to look at the rest of your life,
Well, the way I look at it, the older I get, the less good the taxidermy needs to be because I'm around less. So if I make it to my 80s, all I need is for like a year or two to look good. And then
there
I'm
you
good.
Well, I think another good point to make too is like we have a saying at WCB is you can't kill big bucks if your wife sucks. If your wife doesn't let you go hunting, it's way harder to kill a big deer. And a lot of it too is like, oh, you can't hang deer heads in the house. Well, I think wives see shitty taxidermy. If you give a finished product that's a work of art and it's beautiful, it's much more forgiving for your old lady to have it hanging in the living room.
Yep.
Because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's not like you know what we're talking about.
I do.
It's not a bar tavern taxidermy mount that's
You get 9
straight
inches
on,
of dust
ears-
on it.
Yeah, it's yellowed out because people have been smoking cigars around it for 40 years.
Exactly.
They're works of art now. It's different. So
Majestic.
Well,
majestic.
in what Larry was saying earlier, I mean, if you think about the last couple of things he talked about, half of the things I didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Parts of the deer.
Yeah.
Like you basically become a biologist, a chemist, an artist, all these things to mount a deer. And, if you want to have somebody that doesn't know any of that stuff, but knows how to make the hide, stick to the form and kind of can get the eyeballs in there and the antlers on it, well, there you go, right? I mean, it's for a guy like me, because you remember Gordy, Gordy.
Oh, yeah.
And Gordy was the first guy that started doing all my taxidermy, and he didn't do taxidermy to the open public. He did it for me and another buddy and his brother-in-law, who was like Jimmy, that flies all over the world and kills all kinds of stuff. And I used to get mad at him because I'd drop off a pair of ducks, and he'd be like, yeah, I'll probably get back next year sometime. What do you mean next year?
Yeah.
I killed that thing in like 3 nanoseconds. Next week. I got to hang that thing on the wall, right?
Let's get it going.
And he was very, forthcoming. He's like, Mike, it's, by the time I get to it, it's a long process to get it done right. And I learned that, thankfully, the easy way. Like, I have not had a bad piece of taxidermy done yet. But I have a lot of buddies that have learned the hard way and have shit on their wall. And, it's one thing if you get a shitty whitetail, because, odds are if you live in the Midwest, you're going to get another whitetail. Sam and I are going to Africa this year, and I told you I want to get a giraffe. That's going to be the only one.
Yeah, it better be
right.
looking good.
So it's got to look at least like a giraffe when I get it back, right? If it's a piece of shit, like I'm not going to go spend the money to redo it to go shoot another giraffe,
Right,
like,
for sure.
I'm going to pay somebody to do it right. So when you're on those once in a lifetime hunts, like you've got to be looking out for, hey, look, I just spent a ton of money on this hunt.
Yeah.
Do I really want to, cheapen it up on the taxidermy side of it? No, unless you're loaded and you just want to keep going or whatever. But that's the way I look at it.
I think that's a good way to. I think most people, it's just from the consumer standpoint, it's just they don't know. It's not their fault, or maybe it is true, but it's just they just don't know.
Right. They know one looks bad and one looks good. They don't know why.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't know why.
Well, most people look at the rack. Looks good.
Yeah.
Which
that's the first thing I look at it.
right.
Deer Mountain.
We're programmed.
The last
that
thing
way.
I'm looking at is the dimply things or whatever Larry was talking about in the mouth or whatever. Like,
Congratulations,
Yeah, that.
Land. Yeah.
I'm
That's
not
it.
looking at that.
I got a question for Larry. You know, you've been in this industry a long time. Have you ever hit a point where you were like, I'm burnt out on taxidermy? Like, did you ever hit any spot with that feeling like, I'm over this?
You know, my answer to that's no. But there's so many taxidermists that do get burned out. But the way my position in taxidermy, I went from a professional taxidermist to a sculptor, to a supply company, to a magazine publisher, and now a trade show producer for the last 30 years. So I was able to diversify and do enough things not to get burnt out. And I shouldn't say I've never been burnt out, because I have. When you go in a shop, and we used to do around 300, 350 waterfowl a year. I had a shop, one time I had 6 people working in my shop, 3 full-time, myself, and then 2 part-time. And you get up at 6 in the morning, you go to your business at 7 o'clock, and you don't get out to 6, you burn out. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think as a business person, you have to go about it in a process to where you give yourself some time, your family some time, and the good Lord some time. And when you do all of that, you can eliminate that burnout. But you're only going to do it once you become established, become a top professional taxidermist producing quality work, and you get paid for it. You know, we said it takes 8 hours to do a deer head, and we charge $800. We're not getting $100 an hour. We're having to pay for the materials, the supply, your overhead, insurance, on and on. So you're not going to get rich in taxidermy. Well, you can get rich. I shouldn't say that.
Judging by your background, Larry, you're doing okay.
There are some taxidermists in this industry doing several $1 million worth of work every year. They have good employees, and they're all getting top dollar for their work. If you go to them to get a deer head mounted, you're probably going to pay $1,500. Okay, but there are deer heads out there for $700, $800, so on, $1,000, that are probably as good as that $1,500. But it's reputation, and people know that reputation, and they know what they're going to get, and they're willing to pay for it.
A lot of relationships too. You've built the relationship with the clients. I mean, I think that's huge.
That is so huge. I was able to get into, for years, African work. Y'all getting ready to go to Africa, and there's no better hunting trip on earth. I'm an addicted whitetail hunter. At one time, I was an addicted waterfowler, and then when I went to Africa, I became addicted African hunter. Because when you go,
that's what I'm afraid of, Larry.
Oh, you're going to have a great time. It's unlimited how much money you can spend.
I was only going to go bear hunting once, and I don't know, Sam, how many years did we go?
15 years
yeah,
later.
Right, exactly.
You got to sell a little bit more foam, huh, Mike?
Yeah, I got to sell a lot more foam.
A lot more foam.
Yeah, but the tax, I never have been burnt out. Let me get back to the original question. And I think the taxidermists out there that are successful, they're successful because they are good business people, and they know how to manage their time in their life. And that is so important, that if you don't do that, you're going to get burned out.
Yeah. Well, I see a lot of the really great guys, they're just artists. You know, they don't have a lot of business background, and those are the guys that get burnt out, I believe.
You're exactly right. There's hundreds of them. Yeah. I've met thousands of very successful artistic taxidermists in this business, and I've seen hundreds of them go through burnout. And it's because of the demands of business has, the bills you have to pay, the employees you have to supervise and work with. There are so many elements of that. And in our magazine publication, I beg people to do business articles. And in fact, Sam has offered to do one, and I'm going to take him up on it. Sam's a good businessman, and you can't just teach taxidermy. You have to also teach the other side of it, of how to make money and how to handle a business.
I think you said a lot by setting hours. I mean, in our shop, we set 9 to 5 hours. Now, that's not saying that if Joe doesn't kill a deer and he's got to bring it in at 10 o'clock at night, we'll have somebody on call. But we typically, we run 9 to 5 Monday through Friday by very special appointment on Saturday, and try not to take anything on Sunday except for during the heat of the season.
Yeah.
Because you have to get away from it not to have that burnout, and I love taxidermy. I love it with all my heart. I've loved it since I was a little kid. I don't ever see myself getting burnout, but if I didn't have the girls that work for me, and I was behind every day, and you had to take 22 phone calls that day when my stuff's going to be done, I could see where a one-man shop could get overwhelmed and just get pissy. I mean, it happens, and it's a neat industry, but it's a hard industry to negotiate and navigate, I guess. We take our whole year's worth of work in a 4-month period, and we don't know what that looks like. Mm-hmm. We know as we get more established and we have years of history to predict future, approximately where we're going to be. And I'll step back, like right now, we're in the heart of turkey season right now. I think you guys just started,
2 days, yesterday.
Yeah, we've been in Iowa. We've been going for a week. Florida started back in March. So, I mean, like last year in our shop, we took in 50 birds to mount. I absolutely am bid up on turkey taxidermy. I love that more than anything. So, we're saying, hey, we want to do at least 50 birds a year.
Yeah.
We're a week into the season. I think we've got 12. So we looked at history last year to say, well, what did we have last year? That's going to predict where we're going to be at the end.
Right.
But in our business, we run like days aging reports. So we will actually, if you bring me in a bird, I can almost tell you, within 4 to 6 weeks when you're going to get it back, which a lot of the smaller shops don't do that. And that's kind of things that I want to teach through the Breakthrough magazine, And
Yeah.
I'm calling it the art of the business of taxidermy.
That's a big deal, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
Please tell me you'll frame it up.
I will frame it.
Yeah, you got to.
I've got my whole life, my goal, you got these goals and these mini goals and these major goals. My goal was to make Breakthrough magazine. And I've been in it twice. Thank you, Larry. It was both with stuff that I won at the World Show. Not a world champion, but I won some nice awards and
you had a cover, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that's my next goal. Cover. I don't think I might not make that one because I'm not quite
sorry,
that.
I'm not trying to hint, Larry.
I'm not quite that talented yet. But
Larry, I'll give you some FSI hats and T-shirts if you put Sam on the cover.
Just bribery.
It's not enough.
It's not enough, is it?
Text me the amount. Keep it off air.
So, like in my career, I made it up through the Masters, and I done quite well at some shows. Depends on who shows up. If nobody shows, I win. if they show up, I lose. But I learned a lot. But I did learn now it's not my hobby anymore. So, like to compete at a world level, those guys, like Larry said, some of them will have 100 hours in that piece. Well, Sam wants to be done at 5, and I don't want to work on Saturday. I don't want to work on Sunday. So my competition days are far behind me.
Yeah.
But what I learned from competing, man, it elevated our game. And I don't ever tell anybody we're the best because we're not. We're not even close to the best. I mean, there's way better people, but we can put out a beautiful mount every day. Mm-hmm. But it's because of guys like Larry Bloomquist, the World Taxidermy Show, the state shows, Joe Meter. Mm-hmm. Those guys, they put the path for us to come behind and made it easier for us, in my opinion. And so I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, and Joe Meter's one of my closest friends, and there's not a better individual in this business, and he has taught so many people. Just like Rick said, you went to his course, and Sam, I think you've been.
I have been a couple times,
probably more than once.
Yeah,
and he has taught. I've seen so many current world champions, and their lineage comes from Joe Meter.
Yeah. And what Joe's done. Oh, go ahead, Larry. I'm sorry.
But I was going to say he won one world title, he could have probably won 5 or 6, and but he started judging and teaching, and that's what I was talking about. You do keep a few secrets to yourself that help you get to that plateau, but then once you get there, you taxidermists today are giving that info out for others to learn. I wanted to hold something up here, talking about covers. This piece is a mountain lion piece that won our Akeley Award. Akeley Award is a award at the World Show, and it is a gold medal award. It's not a, but this piece happened to also win Best in the World Non-Antlered Game Head. Okay, and the last show we did was 2 years ago, and it's just making the cover. It's not easy to make a breakthrough cover.
Yeah, I won't make it. I got a dream.
It doesn't always have to be best in world piece, but
Can it be a crazy sales guy?
there are so many.
I smile good.
Yeah, so many artistic pieces like that mountain lion, and we have a difficult time picking covers. We have so many beautiful pieces of taxidermy artwork, and it is artwork today. You had mentioned earlier that a lot of spouses don't necessarily want a lot of deer heads and stuff hanging in their house. My wife, I can't, all around this room are art pieces hanging up. Most of them were mounted by world champions. I don't know if you can see the deer head over there. That's a Joe Meter mount. Brian Dobson mounted this one. Joe Meter did that one. There are a lot of world champions, so I don't have something by every one of them. But I'm a taxidermist, but I let other taxidermists mount my stuff simply for the fact that I respect them and their work is very artistic. I've got a trio of pheasants over there, a hanging mount that I love. That was Billy Ollie, who worked for me for quite a few years till I sold my studio. And Ron Howard, an award-winning taxidermist, did this little Merms quill over here. There's so many things that, but my wife loves this stuff in here. So my daughter, married, lives in Houston. Her husband, Ross, loves to hunt and fish. You know where all his work is? In a little bitty office.
Yeah.
You know? So, and her daddy was a taxidermist. You know, a very successful one. But she prefers not to have her living room and dining room. Now, she does a few things, but it just varies. You know, some, and y'all know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing we didn't get to, when's the next show? What are the dates? And then is it like general admission? Can you just, anybody come to the show?
Okay, this year, it's going to be strictly a trade show registration for the taxidermy industry. We're expecting the largest show we've ever had this year. And we have a big facility, but it's going to be filled to the corners everywhere. And we have always had a public viewing period on Friday night and Saturday. But I just, from experience, I know that it's going to be difficult to let the public in. And to do that, we're not going to have room to put stanchions to keep kids from going in and touching and meddling with stuff. Okay. Mm-hmm. So this year it's strictly a registration. The show is it's in Coralville, Iowa, which is a suburb of Iowa City. Mm-hmm. And it's June. It's August 6th through the 10th. Our show starts on a Tuesday. It ends around 1 o'clock on a Saturday. And if you're interested in taxidermy, you have to, on Saturday, you can get a $35 pass. and you can go to the trade show, and you can go into the competition. But you only have a window from 8 o'clock to 1 o'clock on Saturday. But if you have an interest in taxidermy and want to go see it, there's a $35 pass to get in. That's comparable to a full registration that people pay $235 for from Tuesday through Saturday noon. So there is no general admission, but there is a window on Saturday for people that have an interest and want to go in and see the best work in the world. They can do it for $35.
Awesome. Yeah, I didn't want to talk about it the whole time and never get the dates of this year's show in on the episode. So, no, I think it's great. I thought this first episode of the G2 podcast was killer.
I loved it.
I think we covered from one side to the other. Maybe we missed a few things, but don't mean we can't do it again.
We can do it again.
So
we can do it again. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you guys. This
having
is a
us
blast.
over.
Appreciate it, guys.
Kurt and I have been talking about this for a long time. And then with the relationship with FSI, I pitched it out there and it made sense. Mm-hmm. So dollars and cents ends up to success, we hope. And we're trying to do everything in studio, so we have the good audio. And we will have a few Zoom guys that just can't make it.
But thankfully Larry's got great internet and a great good backdrop.
Right.
Can't be that backdrop.
Yeah, that's amazing. Beautiful.
And again, Larry, I just want to thank you for coming on and being here with us. And I'm grateful that we were able to get things worked out with FSI. I think that's going to be huge for our industry. And I know you'll be a big part of spreading the word on that. I mean, you already have.
I appreciate you bringing Mike and FSI to us. And Sam, I thank you for the invitation. Rick, I'll watch more of your shows here on podcast.
You don't have to.
Mike Chambers, thank y'all again so much.
Yeah, thank you, Larry.
I don't think I met you when I was at the plant or at y'all's facility, but it's good to talk to you. And
we keep him in the lab working.
Yeah, he
you're
puts
doing
me
some
away.
great stuff.
Yeah.
I know urethane foam for the industry, and you are doing some great stuff.
Appreciate
Thank
it,
you
Larry.
so much, Raul. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Well, all right, Sam, I don't know. We didn't talk about this. You got to close these out somehow.
Give somebody a hug. Tell them you love them.
There it is.
One hug at a time. We'll make it a better world.
Awesome.
Bro hugs.
Yep.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, guys.